Good evening, Chicago. Thanks for joining us tonight. This is Jerry Vasilatos with Jose Requena, bringing you another episode of Fear and Loathing in the Windy City. How you doing tonight, Jose?
I'm doing all right. Relaxing here at home. School year. How you doing?
Pretty good. It's been a busy couple days. We're ramping up with a lot more broadcasts here over on Chicago Corner, which is great. Getting our viewership up. We had Laney on last night to talk about disaster preparedness. I've got my little companion who just will not let me go. He's always up here, curious about what's going on with us.
Hey, buddy.
Hold on, I'm going to put him down real quick. Come on, Oreo, get down, buddy. But yeah, I think it's really encouraging to see things seem to be going smoothly with reopening after this year-long quarantine. I don't know what you've seen on your end, but my streets where I'm venturing out to are pretty full.
Well, I think a lot of people notice traffic sucking a lot.
Yeah, that's a good sign.
So people are definitely out and about. I was actually out of town over the weekend. It's Father's Day, did some camping, and I was out of state. So it was weird. I noticed how pronounced non-masking was in Wisconsin. And it seems to be a growing trend here in Chicago, too. I think it's, the non-maskers are going to be overtaking our inside spaces soon. And that's just, I think that masks are generally good hygiene, like a good hygiene item to have during flu season and stuff. So I'm not a mask shamer. I'll have a mask handy, but I do think that we're going to see more non-masking than masks. And I don't know what that's going to mean for future needs of vaccines or whatnot. But yeah,
I have noticed it a lot too. I tend to always have my mask with me. So when I go into a store, I went into my health club the other night and I wear my mask because I didn't really check for signs on the doors, and I walk into the lobby and everybody's like maskless. So I'm like, all right. I mean, I don't use the general workout area anyway. I go straight to the swimming pool. But yeah, it's people are going maskless, and I just hope that's a sign that more people than less went and got vaccinated. It seems numbers are down, so just keep our fingers crossed for this summer that people can enjoy a return to normal life. I had a good Father's Day too. It's nice that you mentioned that. Now, were you visiting your father, or do you have children? I wasn't clear.
I do not have children.
Okay, so you're visiting your dad, or just using the weekend to get away?
Family trip with my dad.
Cool. That's nice. I have a big family, so we got a chance to see my dad, my brother, and my brother-in-law, who are both fathers, and all my nephews. Part of my nephews on my brother and my sister's side. My other sister's kids were working, but perfect time to get together and enjoy your family and be grateful for what we have, especially now that things are getting better. A little less paranoid getting together or going out after quarantine. So we've got some very interesting stories to cover here tonight in another episode of Fear and Loathing in the Windy City. Talk about your fear and loathing. Shocked to discover today with this article that you shared with me that CPS teachers are being laid off, and I will pass it to you to share the story, and I'll bring up on screen. Let me let you start with the story, then we'll bring up the Chicago Teachers Union's comments.
Sure. I don't want to share this busy page on ABC News, but CPS, Chicago Public Schools year came to an end today on Tuesday, and it's announcing that it's laying off more than 400 of its employees. So 443 layoffs were announced last week. CTU is vowing to push back against these layoffs. Most of these layoffs are in underserved communities like North Lawndale, Little Village, and Inglewood.
What a surprise.
Right.
They closed the schools, now they lay off the teachers, and they wonder why crime goes up when kids don't have the opportunities and the education and the training to pursue better lives.
I mean, we have to keep telling these oral histories so that people understand just how stacked the deck is against these communities.
Yeah.
But here's CPS's official statement. CPS said the cuts are part of a normal reallocation of resources, and many of those laid off will be rehired. Each year, CPS conducts its annual staffing adjustment process to enable principals to begin hiring based on the needs of their individual school communities, CPS said in a statement. It's true. This year, schools will be hiring more than 2,000 open teaching and staff positions for the 21-22 school year, which far exceeds the number of teachers and staff impacted. Consistent with previous years, the district expects many of the impacted staff to be hired for other positions within CPS, and the district will be hosting several virtual hiring events in the coming weeks. CPS also said 59 of the layoffs are teachers who were hired into temporary, centrally funded COVID support roles assigned to schools with difficulty covering in-person student instructions due to the pandemic. These teachers accept one-year roles when hired. But CTU responded in a statement, and I abbreviate the statement so we can actually read the statement in full. I think that'd be good to bring up.
Yep, there we are.
Cool. So I'm gonna read it on a separate screen because it's a little on there, but that's for
Be easier for you to read on your end.
Yeah. There.
If I can read it on my end and then just pass it back to you if you want. Yeah.
Thanks.
Do that. Yeah.
I bet.
Forgive the screen glare on my glasses. Okay. School layoffs in the pandemic are unnecessary, dangerous, and cruel. This is from Chris Giovannis, who I believe is probably one of their communications directors. Chicago Teachers Union President Jesse Sharkey issued the following statement today to rank and file CTU members in response to plans by Mayor Lightfoot's CPS team to lay off 443 rank and file educators and supporting staff. Sisters and brothers, we received the Chicago police. That's a whole other thing. We received, because that's probably where all the money's going that they can't put into the schools. We are receiving it was a Freudian slip, everybody. Sorry about that. We've received the Chicago Public Schools layoff list today. Mayor Lori Lightfoot and the district are imposing 443 layoffs on CPS educators and staff at a time when the district is set to receive nearly $2 billion in federal COVID support, designed expressly to prevent this kind of action. Let that sink in. Our students and their families need more support and not less. The mayor continues to be a walking contradiction through her actions and a classic example of how symbolic gestures ring hollow. On Friday, she declared racism to be a public health crisis in many Chicago communities, disproportionately burdened with poverty, unemployment, housing insecurity, and violence. Today, she's destabilizing those same communities by laying off educators at neighborhood schools. President Joe Biden sent these funds to CPS specifically to help the district recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. Based on school location, the highest number of layoffs by zip code is in North and South Lawndale, which was also disproportionately devastated by COVID infection and death, and where families successfully defeated a CPS attempt last year to close 3 neighborhood schools. The mayor's plan to gut staffing at schools she had previously threatened to close exposes the hypocrisy at the root of these layoffs. Some of our strongest rank-and-file members are among those being laid off. School clerk Deanna Myron, who spoke publicly about the need to accommodate educators with medically vulnerable household members, has gotten a pink slip. So has teacher assistant Willie Cousins, who was also one of our most active PSRP leaders during the 2019 strike. We know of other members, including delegates, who've been targeted. In some cases, whole schools have been targeted with half a dozen layoffs at King College Prep in what we think may be an effort to instead bring in non-union ROTC-funded positions bankrolled by the federal government directly instead of CPS, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can find this at the ctulocal1.org website. You can read the full statement, but what an absolute damning condemnation of what Lightfoot is once again doing as far as saying one thing and stabbing us all in the back on the other side of it.
I mean, I did manage to find it. I wanted to read just a little bit.
Sure, go ahead.
About the ending here where they kind of, we will vigorously, Fortunately, we have longstanding contractual rights that protect laid-off members. Specifically, Appendix H, Section 5 of the contract provides that all tenured teachers laid off for any reason, except those with unsatisfactory ratings, are guaranteed placement in the reassigned teacher pool or full-time teacher vacancy for which they are qualified. at full salary and benefits for full school year. With respect to PSRPs, Appendix 1, Section E guarantees all laid-off PSRPs rated developing or better a right to placement in vacant PSRP positions for which they are qualified that exist on the 20th day of the school year, if they exist. We will vigorously oppose every layoff, including those that are retaliatory. If you receive the layoff notice, contact your field rep immediately so that we can initiate the legal grievance processes. Again, our students need more support today, not less, as hundreds of thousands of working class Chicago families continue to struggle to recover from the consequences of the pandemic. Yet the mayor's handpicked board of education seemed determined to continue to practice business as usual, when business as usual before the pandemic was far less than what our students need and deserve. Be clear. We will fight these layoffs at this Wednesday's board meeting. We will fight them in bargaining, and we'll fight them in school actions as necessary. Watch your email for news and next steps. Okay, there we can maybe just get it off. But
yeah,
I just wanted to emphasize, those last points, because it's not a guarantee that these layoffs can be pushed back on, but as you kind of highlighted, some of these layoffs are targeted, and right now there is something that
targeted means political,
right? Politically targeted.
Lightfoot's authoritarian decision making, and I would also say that falls in line with her the elected school board, her resistance to the elected school board.
Oh yeah. And I mean, and she's the perfect vessel for, and so is Kamala Harris, for what some circles are calling lawfare, and a very, strong use of the civic systems, the courts, the schools, what have you, to push an authoritarian agenda. And this, was a concern of what could happen, and it does seem routine on the face of it, as Channel 7 News try to make it seem. But a lot of these, are targeted to some of the loudest members, which makes some of us feel bad that we definitely were not doing our job well enough to piss off Lori. But she'll find other ways to find other ways to fire people. But it's this kind of civic crackdown on union organizing and workforce that was kind of like the stopgap, was the line between the working class people of Chicago that work service jobs, work the kind of essential needs jobs, but also need their kids in school because of those jobs. That relationship in these neighborhoods. Local Chicago media, they have tons of this footage and stories, but to put it and contextualize it in a way that, can prevent an agenda like Lori's, from taking root, is not materializing, which is why we banter about these news stories. It sucks. Lori's definitely, not a fan of CTU. She makes them often seem like they're the antagonist in the situation. But one of the clerks at our local high school, not far from that feeds into in the neighborhood, she didn't want to put her family at risk, who had they were immunocompromised, and
I read that story.
She was fired for that, and so there's a lot of minutia that goes into this kind of like social tinkering by a mayor that has this much power over an entire system as being the final say, and being the executive to people's everyday lives in a neighborhood. I think is what's the ideas behind these elected school boards and oversight of the police, which we'll cover, is to stop someone from having that much power. The sad thing about all this is that we're talking about layoffs in these neighborhoods when so much money has been given to Chicago to deal with any gaps that they saw in their system due to COVID. And as you pointed out, we don't see, that's not mentioned in the story at all, except CTU bringing it up. Like
these are already vulnerable neighborhoods that Lightfoot is now making more vulnerable.
Right. Yeah. And
what fucking good is she as mayor is what I lost my temper.
Yeah.
But seriously, it's just, I have no clue how the F she's going to figure out how to run again when she's got nothing to run on.
I don't think that she will run again. I think you mentioned that once. I think that.
Oh, yeah, you had said that. I mean, I don't know how you don't believe she will. And I hope you're right, despite the fact we're going to have a clown car of other candidates coming out. But I think her ego is going to push her. We'll do a gentleman's bet on that. I don't want her to rerun, but I'm sure that her ego won't allow her not to run. She's Ron 2.0, and those egos factor into so much of the damage and devastation that she's doing in our neighborhoods.
I don't deny that. I also don't think that, but like Rom got sat down because he was too hot for a third term. And the establishment did whatever they did. They ran a clown car, and it worked out for them. Lori was the top clown, and she's bullying city council, going after progressive aldermen, skizzying different groups and the media, and making a name for herself on MSNBC. She can jump to be Biden's AG to help him and Kamala take down 2024. I just feel that mess of a situation coming. And the establishment runs another clown car, and whoever comes out on top, they'll force him to be a capitalist, civic, authoritarian bully on city council. So, Lori's got a huge ego. I also think that she's got a nice grift, and she's not going to say no to, them telling, hey, that's enough. We got other plans.
Now, on the flip side of this issue, as it relates to the pandemic and the health hazards that have faced people through this past year, we shift gears into not layoffs, but a potential upcoming strike from Chicago nurses.
Cook County, so leaving city and Lori Lightfoot alone for a moment. Hats off to CTU for being the hub for the voices of Chicago, just calling out. I really particularly like this line before we leave her and start bugging Tony Preckwinkle. But Mary Lightfoot continues to be a walking contradiction and a textbook example of symbolic gestures ringing hollow. On Friday, she declared racism a public health crisis. Big show, big media show. You yell at other people to feel bad and stuff, but are you putting anything in policy? No. The same day, she gives pink slips to educators working in Black and Brown communities in crisis. So that's Lori Lightfoot's track record. I do think that there's a nuance to gossip about how Tony Preckwinkle does things differently, but it wasn't enough to satisfy. I mean, the situation in Cook County has, that's ground zero for anybody that was dealing with COVID and had nowhere else to go in Chicago. And nurses there are staging what will likely be a one-day strike this Thursday.
Let's go to that, and maybe we can even run the video if it ends up working. Let's see here. Waiting for the page to load. Cook County Health, which runs. Oh, here we go. And the video is not loading now. Anyway, should I read from the story? I don't know if you had it in here. Okay.
Yeah.
About 1,250 Cook County Health nurses are. Oh, sorry about my screen's getting a little bit wonky over here. So Cook County Health may postpone surgeries, reschedule appointments as it prepares for possible nurses strike. Cook County Health, which runs Stroger and Provident hospitals, is considering postponing elective surgeries, rescheduling appointments, and sending ambulances to other hospitals, depending on if and how many of its nurses go on strike Thursday. Now, this is county hospital, not all hospitals. County serves the public, and this is where the nurses are making their stand. About 1,250 Cook County Health nurses are planning to walk off the job Thursday for a one-day strike. but that number could shrink to nearly 900 after the Illinois Labor Relations Board found Tuesday that 374 of those nurses should not be allowed to strike because their absence would pose a clear and present danger to health and safety of the public. Typically, employers can take findings from the board to circuit court, and Cook County Health said Tuesday it would seek a court-ordered injunction. An injunction could formalize the board's ruling to prevent the nurses from walking off the job. You know, it's interesting because health with strikes as they relate to health institutions is pretty scary, but it's not like all the hospitals in the city are going on strike. This is a specific stand at Cook County, which is literally like a stone's throw from Rush Medical Center.
Right.
So it's not like there isn't care right nearby so that the union can make its point with the purpose of this strike. The Nurses Union, National Nurses Organizing Committee, and National Nurses United plans to appeal the Labor Relations Board decision, said Angela Walker, Cook County Health nurse and member of the bargaining team. The nurses work at Stroger, Provident, the Systems Clinics, and Cermak Health Services, which provide health care to the detainees at the Cook County Department of Corrections. That's like another hotbed where COVID was running rampant. Depending on how many nurses walk off the job, Cook County Health may bring in temporary nurses from agencies, postpone elective surgeries, reschedule non-urgent medical appointments, and or go on ambulance bypass, which is when ambulances are told to take patients to other hospitals, spokeswoman Alexandra Normington said in a statement. Cook County respects our employers' rights to collectively bargain, and we remain committed to ensuring the continuation of critical operations so that we may provide life-saving care for patients in need, Normington said. The nurse's last contract expired in November, Walker said. A main sticking point in the contract negotiations has been staffing. The union says the hospital system is short hundreds of nurses. Nurses are working short every single day. Walker said it's just eroding our entire system, delaying patient care and patient treatment. Nurses are just burned out. They don't have the appropriate time to care for their patients. I mean, this is the same story we hear with them deciding to lay off teachers or not staff schools enough. Some of the most important essential workers in our economy as it comes to the protection of public health, safety, our children, our nurses and teachers. Yeah. And there's just no priority given to taking care of them properly, giving more nursing staff so that these nurses aren't burnt off. You know, can you imagine nurses at hospitals that are working these long shifts because they don't have any kind of reprieve with other staffing, the fatigue that comes from that?
Yeah.
As it relates to the care of the patients.
I mean, nursing is a hard enough job as it is. You're dealing with very sick people, and sometimes in some of the most traumatic and harshest moments in their lives, you know, and that's your everyday. Then having to do it through COVID, and then having to do it during these conditions, and then having this pushback. Yeah.
And they went through the worst of it during COVID. I mean, consider that too. If it weren't for our nurses,
Cook County, definitely.
Especially Cook County, as it was serving the correctional facilities also. Mm-hmm. Nurses are working short every single day. It's just eroding our entire system. Oh, I went over that. Normington said Cook County Health is continually recruiting nurses and has hired nearly 800 nurses over the past year. It's still possible that the union and health system could reach an agreement before Thursday, averting a strike, but as of Tuesday afternoon, no additional bargaining sessions were planned between the union and hospital system before Thursday, Walker said. About 2,500 members of the Service Employees International Union Local 73 also plan to strike this week beginning Friday, and that strike may last longer than one day. Those employees work in offices under the Cook County President and the County Clerk's Office, in civilian positions in the Sheriff's Office and Cook County Health. About 1,473 of those workers are part of Cook County Health, working at Stroger and Provident Hospitals clinics and in mental health services at Cermak. Mental health is completely underfunded also. They include health care professionals, technicians, technologists, and service and maintenance workers. Points of disagreement include pay equity, pandemic pay, and retiree health benefits, among other issues, said Eric Bailey, a union spokesman. The union's last contract expired in November. Now you'll have so many anti-union people screaming that, you know, the unions are bad and you know, they're corrupt and they're throwing a monkey wrench in the system. We've seen literally a return to like what it was like in the 20s and 30s when unions were demonized because people were fighting for their rights, whether it was for higher paychecks, better working conditions, the class divide. I mean, I was talking about with Daniel last week and hope to have him on the show that he and I can discuss it, because he was able to present the case so much more eloquently than I could with his perspective on history.
I mean, I think that another thing that we're seeing is especially in Chicago, this is kind of like the Democrats' like stronghold in a lot of ways in the Midwest, there's kind of like this doubling down of this strategy in the 90s from the Democrats of pushing the unions away as like a dying breed, as an antiquated kind of way of looking at the world, as dog whistling to say uneducated masses of people, because they're reverting to their liberal professional class of voters that were moving into cities, and they didn't want to feel bad about we're not racist, we're not like the Republicans, we're not backwards, we're liberals, but we're college educated, and
they're virtue signaling,
right? And so like we see it in Chicago local media, like reflexively. I feel like Chicago is this hub of libertarian and weird like thought. All the micromanaging that goes into American society, I feel like Chicago has like in a little petri dish. But to make the Cook County workers seem like they're pushing,
they're the bad guys.
Right, like they're putting people's health at risk, or they're putting, they're being unreasonable. Like the system's already like dealing with the problems that, addressing the problems that they're trying to, that they say they're dealing with. But where's the impetus to say that, if it wasn't for these group of people, this specific city would have had a much
time
of COVID. These were people that were servicing the very same communities that Lori Lightfoot's also screwing over with these teacher layoffs. These are the same communities that need these public services, Cook County services. So it's really getting screwed over in Chicago.
They're the heroes that saved the city, and now they're being painted as the villains after they've more than proven themselves.
And the necessity of it. And why is that? Because you can't say that what the nurses are asking for is to have strong and adequate enough staffing so that they also have a decent quality of life. Because that would also solidify their union having a perennially solid number of members to guarantee a quality of life for them to go on strike again, to ask for more things. And that really snowballs into an effect that leads just into like a universal single payer kind of system, and to a reprioritizing of healthcare to the point that emphasizes the point of service needs, human to human. That's what you get when you play into the nurse's narrative. And that's why we don't get that. That's why I wanted to bring this story up. Well,
it's so important. I mean, we need to give more support to our nurses, our teachers, all of our frontline workers, essential workers.
Yeah,
that's what it comes down to. And they're amongst the most essential, along with those fighting for a higher minimum wage in our stores that supplied everybody when regular industry had to shut down offices. The white collar class had to kind of shut down.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the fact that people are even going back to offices is kind of ridiculous at this point. I think that we've shown that like this whole big technological trend of revolution that Silicon Valley wants works at some level for the professional class of people. You can get rid of downtowns, across mega cities in America, and have your laptop suburban professional lifestyle, and give us walkable communities for, us blue collar, clerk working people. But that's something that rants about a different day.
Good point from Andrew Golick here. I'm sure those people complaining about unions won't say the same about the police unions or the Fraternal Order of Police.
Right.
Well stated, Andrew. And that's the root of the hypocrisy we see as it comes to what unions and causes people will support. They'll support the police union and the Fraternal Order of Police because out of fear, as opposed to supporting teachers unions and nurses unions out of necessity and respect.
Right. I mean, like that's the thing. Like when you talk about teachers, they're greedy, overly entitled, lazy workers that feed off of the American tax dollar. When you talk about nurses, they malign and mischaracterize, and it's often very misogynistic. Male nurses get put down, female nurses get maligned. Their history and work gets pushed. Expertise gets pushed aside by big pharma and no, a lot of doctors are signing up now. But it's when you talk about cops, it's what the trauma that their families go through when they leave the house. The danger they put themselves in, how selfish they danger. Yeah, it gets tiresome. Firefighters. Everybody likes firefighters because you need them, but that's why cops befriended them, and in the union world they kind of suck. But
yeah. Nobody wants their tax dollars going to those greedy teachers to educate the kids and give them training and opportunities, but they'll complain about the crime later.
Right. The number of shootings and homicides. Speaking of which, and I'm sorry, guys, wanted to make this pivot then
sure.
To other aspects of our cities. I feel like sometimes But many residents, no joke, Fear and Loathing was kind of just like trying to make The Wire kind of shorts. And
I can bring up the screen with the Eyewitness news story that's pivoting into your next story if you'd like, and we can listen to the reporter.
Well, let's see. Let's see if this video is this.
I've got it loaded on my end. Let me put it on the. Let's do this here. Let me quickly get rid of our banners and let me play it. We can
go for it.
You have to share it. Yeah.
Homicides were down from last year's Father's Day weekend, but many residents are calling on the police to do more to stop the violence.
8 people killed over the weekend. Anat Kimchi was stabbed to death Saturday afternoon in the Loop in what appears to be a random attack.
We still have a witness who's cooperating with us. We are seeking the identity and the eventual arrest of the person who stabbed that female.
Police say Giovanni Arsuaga was killed and his wife injured in a shooting at the Puerto Rican Day Parade in Humboldt Park Saturday night. Police say they have seen the graphic cell phone video of the incident. They say it started with a minor car accident.
And then a group of people swarmed that specific car, and they are seen hitting and beating the woman who's the driver of the vehicle, and then eventually dragging her out.
Detectives are working to track down the people responsible for taking the life of this young father.
This should not have happened. This is unacceptable. This is unacceptable. This needs to end. And I feel for the family.
This Humboldt Park resident who didn't want to be identified says she's fearful for her family living in the city.
I'm scared. I'm moving out. I'm getting out of Chicago. It's a wrap. I'm leaving.
Superintendent Brown says the nation is experiencing a crime wave, but violence in Chicago is going down.
Wow.
Decline in both homicides and shootings in the city, which is particularly unusual if you look at the other major cities in the country seeing a continued peaking of violent crime.
Based on what numbers?
In Humboldt Park, Will Jones, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
Wow.
So I mean,
some spin there.
Yeah. So right. So that contradicts this next story. But I do want to go back to that awful shooting at the Puerto Rican.
I'm sorry. Let me. We've got audio from this. Let me shut that screen off. Hang on. Sorry.
All right. So that was over the weekend. On Monday was one of the deadliest days in Chicago this year, following a weekend with more than 50 people shot. So over the weekend, more than 50 people were shot. So right here's the statistic. There have been at least 317 homicides in Chicago this year. That's up from 302 this time last year. So we have 15 extra deaths. So crime isn't necessarily, maybe crime, but shootings and deaths, definitely not. So that shooting at the Puerto Rican parade, it was particularly awful because it started over a minor traffic accident with people yelling at each other. I don't know. No one knows any extra details beyond that. But it was caught on video. It was caught on Facebook Live. It was caught on different streams. It was also caught, and I can't find the Twitter account, but it was caught on Chicago, which the public surveillance cameras that they have up in the neighborhoods, and and that footage was shared on Twitter illegally. And actually that became an investigation of its own, like who shared that shooting footage on social media that was official government surveillance footage.
You mean official government surveillance? Who pays and supplements the government funding?
Right.
It's our footage.
Right. I mean, I don't disagree with people leaking it out there. It's just
I don't either.
That's kind of interesting. You know, that's a interesting aspect of that story in and of itself. But
yeah, how paranoid they are about the fact that free information can get out that might contradict what the official police narrative would be spun into.
Right. And I mean, we do want these people caught, and it was a quite graphic murder, and the person that did the murder was quite brazenly caught on camera. So there is hope that they're found. So that's what you need the surveillance state for. But then we also have this crazy amount of shootings in over Monday. On Monday, we had God, how many murders were there on Monday alone?
I think this was from the Sun-Times article.
Yeah, this is the Sun-Times article. Okay, following a week of mass shootings, the weekend where there was at least 7 homicides on Monday, one shy of the worst day for murders in Chicago so far this year. So that was just a week ago when 8 people, and so just a week ago we hit the record where 8 people were shot to death, and 4 of them in a mass shooting in Inglewood. Yesterday, 7 people were killed in Roseland, Woodlawn, East Garfield, North Lawndale. You know, same neighborhoods, and
it seems things are getting back to normal.
Yeah,
unfortunately,
right. The big question to open the city for the summer, and yeah,
everyone was stir crazy to go out and start shooting each other. I'm sorry, it's not funny, but I mean, there's some kind of macabre, commentary on it. We were safer when people were stuck at home instead of rushing to get everything open so quickly.
Yeah, we're not short on the macabre in Chicago. It's like, what do you do about it? And the answer isn't throw more cops, throw more money at foot soldiers to patrol neighborhoods and hassle people and suspiciously create narratives about what's going on in the neighborhood without consulting and trusting and building relationships with the people in these communities. And you can actually just sidestep so much of this if you just empower those communities directly, the way that organizers have said. You had Jamal Green talking about community centers, built from the community instead of like these YMCAs with the police academy deals. You also had an ordinance passed by Daniel Espada, who's part of the Socialist Caucus in Chicago, detailing to the mayor the most efficient ways and for neighborhood needs to be met with a federal stimulus money in the face of COVID that we're receiving from the Biden administration. So
was it you I spoke with last? We were also talking about forcing police to live in the communities that they police. Was that something we spoke about, or I don't remember. I know I had that conversation with someone.
I'm not sure. That's not a new idea. That's been, the fact that
makes sense too.
Not even put in practice in Chicago. The idea that like we could have cops from Inglewood, from Roseland, from North Lawndale, living in the neighborhoods, servicing the neighborhoods. Most of our police still live, Evergreen Park, like a little scared to say it, but deep southwest side, deep northwest side, most of the police. And I mean, there have been ramifications. I know that some years ago, like police lieutenants, sergeants, and from those neighborhoods as families were targeted. But like the amount of surveillance, the amount where we're at right now with crime in the city, I think is a reasonable time to discuss real reforms of law enforcement, how you execute enforcing the law in the city, and the city that's seen it and done it all. And I do think that the best forum for that is a civilian oversight board, much in the same way that we're going to have this elected school board. I don't know, and this is just me, now jumping into these two topics a little bit. I don't know if we would have won the elected school board as, it's over Mayor Lightfoot's objections. Had we gone on strike, I don't know how. I mean, I wish we had gone on strike. I wish CTU had gone on strike. I wish the city had gone on strike. It was a strange strike fight. There was a lot of kind of internal tensions. A lot of people in the school system worked during COVID. They were inside the buildings. They were, there as needed for, an emergency. Some of them caught COVID while working inside the schools. Some of them were doing a lot of that in-school stuff to the utmost degree that students were asking for it. And those discussions of should students come back was a divisive one, I would say, among CTU. So the vote going the way it did, people can hash out that history, but I do think that was internal tension built up, during the entire COVID experience. From people having very different experiences, and prioritizing different things during COVID. As far as that goes, I do think now that the elected school board seems more likely than not to be formed in the vision that has culminated from so many community groups. 21 elected school board members talking school policy. Should open up the idea that we can do this with police, and it'd be a lot less scary. I think that some of the neighborhoods that are reticent to these radical changes saw how much hand and how much influence culturally they had over the CTU fight. I do think that Chicago police that are still, vindictive about the Van Dyke trial and situation, but they're stuck in that at that point, which was some years ago. I think that if we had a different mayor, we could be negotiating a very different city. So, I mean, these shootings, there's no end in sight because nothing's changing except more policing and more criminalization. We've seen that, in the 80s. We've seen that in the 90s. We saw that during the War on Terror year ramp ups, and I think that what we're seeing is people are going to be so afraid of violence stemming from organized crime, having more people willing to do things out of desperation. And people are going to look the other way as, we do have more policing and an aggressive, civically fascist court system. So
I forgot what the name of, maybe it wasn't the last documentary that Michael Moore had done. It may have been the one before, but he had visited some European countries where there were literally no prisons because so much more money and the police force was not as militarized as it is here in the United States. And, he's showing in modern industrialized nations in Europe that everything we're talking about here can work. It's just this continued repetition of insanity, thinking that the results are going to be different if you just throw more money at putting more cops on the streets, as opposed to putting more money into the teachers and keeping the schools open. It's just
keep people healthy.
Yeah, we're on a merry-go-round talking about it all the time, and we just don't have. Doesn't seem we've got the power to force our mayor or our elected representatives in city council to focus. I don't know what it's going to take. I mean, we share these stories and share our frustration about it, and we know what the problem is. It's just, how do you get the good people in there, take the money out of politics to get the people in there that aren't influenced by the money and the donors to do what's right by the rest of us?
I mean, it's hard. I mean, like, this is in the show for it, but even what's going on with like the filibuster and Manchin and stuff like that. I mean, this is a country that prioritizes a legal system, a rule system that is enforced with lethality from the police force for Jeff Bezos to get bailout money to go to space.
Yeah. Luckily they nixed him on that. Lex Luthor was denied his, what was it, 8 or 9 billion. So it was funny because he
almost did he get an MGM grand like bailout?
Yeah.
Something like that?
So what happened was, for those that are familiar with that, I'm surprised if people hadn't heard about it, but I think the day after he requested the $9 billion bailout to fund his space program, Amazon bought MGM Studios for $8 billion. So it's like,
he doesn't need it.
Refunding his, of course he doesn't. It's priorities. He doesn't want to put the money into his space research. He wants to put the money into MGM that he's going to monetize while taking the government money that he's then going to sell that research back to the government. It's madness, as Kit likes to scream.
Yeah,
madness.
This is, I mean, like at the root of it, like this is also a country that has the most imprisoned human beings on the planet than anyone else, for no other purpose than slave labor and to keep, a culture of fear and loathing amongst, its populace. This idea that, you'll let hundreds of thousands of people just live out, torturous existence so that 3 jerks can be more powerful than everybody else on the planet. It's a sick system. It's a sick country.
Yeah.
And it needs education, it needs healthcare. So like,
best country in the world.
Yeah.
Land of the free, home of the brave, as Snake Plissken said in the Escape from New York and LA movies. Land of the free, home of the brave.
I wanted to share. Can I share my tab of the Spanish?
Yes. As I was putting the thumbnail together for tonight's show covering our stories, I ran out of room, but I know that this was a story that you wanted to return to, so it is in the show notes. So yeah, please introduce it to our audience and bring us up to date on that.
Thank you. So I've been sharing, I don't feel great sharing conspiracy theory stuff, but it's kind of conspiratorial stuff. But this is a blog. It's from Taumalipas. Can you see my screen?
I can. There you go.
This is called Inside Crime. This is about a recent shooting. I mean, like this just happened. We talked last week a little bit in depth of an article. I mean, this happened today. This article's from today. The elections in Mexico had some ramifications that are pretty nuanced that I wanted local Chicago audience to kind of, glean as much as I have from. But we saw power change hands in Mexico City. We saw power change hands in the state of Taumalipas, where we had noted the governor, Cabeza de Vaca, Francisco Javier Cabeza de Vaca, had long ties to the Gulf Cartel. Now there was a mass shooting in the city of Reynosa, Taumalipas, that may cause the local government to go ask for more militarization of the police. Is one way that this narrative can go. So I'm just going to read from the article.
Please, yes.
Though the motive for the rampage in the northern Mexican border city of Reynosa that left scores of civilians dead remains unexplained, security experts point to 3 possible scenarios: a war within the Gulf Cartel, a political settling of scores, or a mere desire to sow chaos. Speaking at a press conference on June 21st, Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador blamed armed commandos for the violence and ordered that an investigation be opened into the string of shootings in Reynosa that left at least 19 dead. One day. The attacks in Reynosa, which sits on the U.S.-Mexico border in the state of Taumalipas, took place in under 2 hours on June 19th, just 3 days ago, with people seemingly targeted at random by gunmen traveling in vans, according to local media outlet Elefante Blanco. Those killed included nurses, shopkeepers, taxi drivers, students, construction workers, innocent people just going about their lives. 4 armed men presumed to have been among those carrying out the violence died in a shootout with authorities. So that's lucky for them. Elefante Blanco reported 2 women who allegedly been kidnapped by the gunmen were rescued. While Reynosa is a major criminal hotspot on the U.S.-Mexico border and regularly sees shootouts between gangs, violence on this scale has not been seen for at least 4 years. So what's going down? So this article openly speculates, because this is kind of where Mexico's at. So, so what's one real plausible scenario? A Gulf cartel showdown. That'd be bad for Chicago, because, you know, if one cartels are at war in Mexico, I hope that doesn't translate to more gang violence in Chicago. But a Gulf cartel showdown is one possible scenario. Reynosa, along with other border cities such as Matamoros and Nuevo Laredo, has long been a bastion for the Gulf cartel. Gotta stop saying names so like that. They're scary. This major criminal group has enjoyed a period of stability in northeastern Mexico after the weakening of the Zetas, its main rival, thanks to the war on the cartels from 2008. However, the Gulf cartel has not been able to avoid the fragmentation that has weakened so many of Mexico's principal criminal groups. According to Guadalupe Correa Cabrera, who's a good analyst and expert on U.S.-Mexico affairs at George Mason University in Virginia, the Gulf cartel's control of criminal economies on the border is being contested by a number of rivals. Today, we cannot speak of just one Gulf cartel faction at the border. They don't operate in a cohesive manner. They are various groups. There is also the presence of various groups previously associated to the Zetas. Many of them are not just dedicated to drug trafficking, but also kidnapping, extortion, oil theft, and piracy. She explained, one of the Zetas' notable splinter groups in the Northeast Cartel, Cartel del Noreste, which has steadily gained ground in northeastern Mexico over the last 3 years, and has aggressively challenged the control of the Gulf Cartel. These clashes have left a bloody trail in late April. They've killed and burned the bodies of 8 people linked to the Gulf Cartel in the town of Camargo, 75 kilometers west of Reynosa. It's a hotspot for this stuff. When fighting between the Gulf Cartel and Northeast Cartel has been reported in Reynosa since 2017, it is likely recent shootings are connected to this dispute or another of the Gulf Cartels. One possibility is that the events in Reynosa were linked to protecting territory. Said Marisol Ochoa, a Taumalipas security expert at Mexican University. And that this happened right at the, I don't have the map with me, but it happened right at a point, Chicagoans could probably picture this kind of clearly between an industrial site and just a kind of sleepy community. So the position itself and the community that was targeted, those industrial sites afford a lot of money for this kinds of operations. So that's one idea. But the other one, quite openly being talked about in Taumalipas, is that this has to do with the election and a political realignment that's happening in the state. Another hypothesis is that the shootouts were due to the recent political upheaval seen in Taumalipas. The state's current governor, Francisco Cabeza de Vaca, is a fugitive. Having had his political immunity stripped, he faces a warrant for his arrest on charges of ties to organized crime. Back in 2004, an investigation indicated that while running to be mayor of Reynosa, he allegedly received bribes from the Gulf Cartel in exchange for protection. The National Action Party, Partido de Acción Nacional, PAN, to which Cabeza de Vaca belongs, recently lost its majority in Taumalipas legislature, which may have forced criminal groups to try and seek leverage and forge new agreements with politicians. The well-known participation of security authorities in criminal acts in Taumalipas indicates that organized crime has always counted on the degree of protection. The current political realignment could create instability. So, quite openly, and as we talked about on the show, allegedly, Cabeza de Vaca was also facilitating political bribes with this cartel money, as was testimony of the former Pemex CEO that was charged in 2009 and extradited back to Mexico to be arrested in 2020 for having a massive bribing scandal across Mexico to get a monopoly on the energy sector. He's alleged that Cabeza de Vaca was also tied to that, which connects to former President Calderon, who allegedly his initial campaign was funded by Cabeza de Vaca with Gulf Cartel money. How much known to him at that point, or I don't know. So it is a scary thing if this is political, and you can see that both of these situations may be true at the same time. So the third scenario is also just somebody trying to create a climate of fear, and for very direct purposes. Ochoa also suggests to incite crime that the violent rampage could have been due to a third, simpler option. According to her, these actions were not necessarily part of some calculated plan, but simply sought to dispel any sense of security among the population. This is something that I also think happens in Chicago often. The events in Reynosa appears to have been improvised. 14 civilians died who were not involved in organized crime. It was a very disorganized operation. It's not necessarily clear what settling of scores may have taken place here, said Ochoa. As Reynosa has undergone a recent period of relative stability without many violent acts of this magnitude, an armed group may have been seeking to create conflict. Sowing fear among the general population is also a tool for criminal groups. So also to highlight about, I've been following one of these analysts on Twitter for a minute. She had some good quotes in a recent Rolling Stone article as well. That some of this could also be tied to the immigration crisis, or I don't want to call it crisis. Damn Republicans! The migration from Guatemala to the U.S. border. If people can afford $7,000 to hire a coyote to shepherd them from Guatemala through, or meet them from Guatemala to, or closer to the border, get them over the border to the U.S. I mean, a criminal enterprise like the Gulf Cartel, when you have hundreds of people coming, 100 people willing to pay $7,000 a head, 1,000 people willing to pay $7,000 a head. You're talking about billions of dollars in black market money. So this territory, Taumalipas, it's right by the Gulf of Mexico. It's got all the oil and gas that we mentioned. It's got like 8 entry points into the U.S. and it's becoming a hub of violence, and it politically now we see very unstable, with the president and the local governor at odds. The state government wanting to protect the local governor, the state government flipping to the president's party, and now this. So I just wanted to give everyone an update, since this is my place to kind of do that.
Yeah. No, well, you gave us such a really comprehensive overview on last Tuesday's show. This is a pretty worthwhile update on the situation over there, and it definitely does have some links with relating to what we're dealing with over here.
And it's just I'm gonna stop sharing now, but as we talk about, especially in Chicago, we have Lori, our cop mayor, and we're dealing with an increase in violence in major cities of America. The populace of Mexico is pretty savvy as to the terror that organized crime would inflict on civilians. The people of Chicago, I don't think are that different. It can't, help but be a little paranoid, that local media and, when they get pushed into a disarray, they kind of just feed into what's easier, and that's the shock value of what crime, of the terror that crime creates. But where does crime come from? And that's something that we knew the answer to a long time ago, but we keep going through these cycles because I think it's just helpful in a capitalistic society. I think it's helpful in a police state society like the U.S. And, my hope in highlighting these stories is that, we get to those root cause solutions that we've been talking about.
Stop kicking the can.
Yeah. But we're going to, because I think we're going to conclude with this these last 2 developments on a police oversight board that Lori ran on, and is now working overtime to sabotage.
Why don't we? I'm going to share that screen, and I could even let's play the video.
Yeah.
This comes from WTTW.
Window to the world.
Oh, so this is the whole 27-minute show. Does it lead in the beginning of the show?
Yeah. Well, I don't think we need to see all that.
Welcome to the Week in Review. I'm Amanda Vinicky. Paris Schatz has the evening off. We will be joined by our Week in Review guests in just a moment, but first, some of today's top stories. City Council critics blocked a plan to give civilians, rather than the mayor, oversight of the Chicago Police Department.
Fucking
in a bid
idiots.
to win more support, Alderperson Harry Osterman this morning introduced a revised version of the ordinance, but Alderperson Chris Talero says change came too late.
That represents a lot of negotiations by advocates for this, with a lot of giving and taking.
This is the people's ordinance that you guys have wanted me to bring to vote for quite a long time.
The raucous meeting ended with no vote on any measure changing supervision of the CPD. This despite a since abandoned campaign pledge from Mayor Lori Lightfoot backing a grassroots oversight plan. More on our website. Residents of Rockton in northern Illinois can.
I think we could stop it there. That was it.
Yeah.
Anyone within a
I've got 2 screens here, so it's like I'm always looking over here to like control it, but I've got a speaker in front of it. It's like, where's my mouse going to reduce the screen? Sorry about that. But yeah, I mean, so that's the overview.
Yeah. And that was in response to the Sun-Times article I shared with you. So like the day before, local, the grassroots did their job, and 11th hour compromise reached on civilian police review over Lightfoot's objections. They had a compromise that was going to finally make this a reality. And Lori flexed on her allies to stall. She's just stalling for time. She doesn't have a plan, except this idea, maybe a narrative that, there's way too much crime. There's record crime. This isn't the time to experiment with crime, with anything. Not that, that doing what we've been doing before the pandemic worked, So yeah, like that's my reason for bringing this up. Like the civilian oversight of police in Chicago is such a crucial aspect to breaking down the war on drugs, the culture of fear and loathing that capitalism in America perpetuates on its populace in order to keep them subservient and working dead-end jobs, till their bodies break down and then there's no health care for them. It's crucial. And I mean, like, I've said it, like, it's about, putting about all the people that go to CAPS meetings, like, you guys hired the chief intendant. Like, that's where we're at with that.
Yeah.
Lori Lightfoot doesn't even want that because centralized control is just too important to the oligarchy that she serves. And I do think that she's going to stall for time until the end of her term, and she's not going to run again. My other thing, I am paranoid. I just say things. I'm not, I said, not an award-winning reporter. I read other reporters' stuff and some, conspiracy in there. But like, for me as a Chicagoan, this city and its relationship to the world and what it can do and what it can offer has always been what happens when its population gets together and does something together, whether it was creating unions, whether it was, like this great, transit system that, we've enjoyed, whether it's our culture of of neighborhoods and the interwoven stories that, that happen there. Like that's Chicago at its best, Chicago at its worst is the inordinate amount of sophistication that goes into suppressing all of that. Because it's a lot, and it is impressive how much they think about the rabble rising up against them. It's like that seems to be like all that University of Chicago crowd thinks about sometimes. Like how do we keep things how do we keep the rabble down?
You may be using other people's stories to share what's going on, but you're very, very eloquent in providing the final thoughts on where it all goes.
I appreciate. Yeah,
it's true. I wish I could be as eloquent as you are.
I just ramble too much. I appreciate you hearing me out and letting me get all this, going through all this with me. There's, Chicagoans, I think, are going through a weird time. And as, we mentioned, like no one wants a clown car, but they were going to get a clown car. So our best bet would be that, serious organizers in Chicago that are serious about using the election cycle for a systemic change should maybe, consider a consensus candidate, I would say.
I agree. Can't argue with that. We're at a little over an hour now, and I think we've covered most of the major stories that we had prepared for tonight. So I want to thank Jose again for essentially helping lead the show, allowing me to comment here and there where I can. But I always love when a co-host comes in with a full slate of really good stories for us to talk about and share with our audience. Thanks to everybody in the live chat tonight that participated. And if you like the channel and you haven't already, please like and subscribe. Share it with your friends. Share it on social media. Share it on Twitter. Share it on Facebook. You can find us on Twitter at Chicago_Corner. I always encourage our viewers to submit your own stories that we might be able to cover. It's not all politics and news. It can be culture, the arts, things happening in your neighborhood. You can also reach me directly at the email address jerry@chicagocorner.tv. Jose, you're on Twitter at jrec13.
That's me.
And I can be reached directly at Nightstar Pro. That's my production company name. So anything else you want to throw in before we depart for the evening, Jose?
I just wanted to thank you, Jerry. Chicago Corners needed help and love to grow for a long time. Thank you for taking this up and getting this all organized so that, Lainey does works a lot. Kira works a lot. I'm all over the place. Thanks for holding this line and keeping a narrative from Chicago consistent for people to learn from and share with. So thanks a lot, man.
It's my privilege. Thank you very much. And to everyone else out there in Chicago, we are tentatively scheduled to have Jamal Green back this Friday after we had some technical difficulties last Friday, but hopefully he will be returning this Friday so we can talk about updates with the Majesty All-Stars and cover maybe some other stories. In the meantime, stay safe out there and good night, Chicago.
Later.